cold depths of space, a brutal empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries made one fatal mistake. They discovered an ancient human vessel and arrogantly woke its guardian from cryosleep as a trophy. They expected a primitive relic. Instead they awakened the spark that would burn their entire empire to ash. Before we dive deeper into the story, please subscribe. It costs you nothing but helps stellar HFY a lot. The nebula veil swallowed light like a hungry maw. Stars here died slow, painful deaths, their dying gasps painting the void in sickly purples and blood reds. Through this eternal twilight, the Zorak Dominion cruiser Dominion's Fong prowled, its angular hull bristling with plasma lances and boarding spines. Captain Slith lounged in the command throne, iridescent scales catching the crimson glow of tactical displays. His forked tongue flicked, tasting the recycled air thick with the musk of conquest. Sensor anomaly confirmed, the tactical officer hissed, yellow slit pupils narrowing. Massive derelict. No power signatures. No life signs. Configuration. Unknown. Older than our archives. Slith's tail coiled with predatory delight. The Zorak had ruled this arm of the galaxy for 1,200 cycles without challenge. Their empire was a machine of stagnation, deliberate, brutal, eternal. Innovation was branded heresy. Any race showing sparks of ingenuity was broken, their brightest minds neural-collared and forced to maintain the very weapons that enslaved them. The Lyrith, once graceful starsingers whose songs could align planetary orbits, now plucked of flight feathers, toiled in asteroid mines until their hollow bones snapped. Insectoid hives on forge worlds labored until their chitin cracked and their collective minds fractured under pheromone suppression. Hope? Crushed. Rebellion? Glassed from orbit. The galaxy had learned to kneel. Emperor Vexor will be pleased, Slith rasped, fangs gleaming. A new trophy for the Obsidian Hall. Board it. Secure anything of value. If the builders still linger, chain them. 3 boarding pods launched with mechanical shrieks, slamming into the colossal vessel's scarred hull. The Aegis Arc loomed like a forgotten god, kilometers long, its lines elegant yet alien, etched with symbols no Zorak tongue could decipher. The interior corridors greeted the shock troops with oppressive silence. Smooth alloys hummed faintly under emergency bioluminescent veins. No dust. No decay. Just waiting. Deeper the Zorak advanced, claws clicking on decks that felt strangely warm. They reached the central cryo vault, a vast cathedral chamber lined with hundreds of pods stretching into shadow. Most stood dark, empty husks. But one, massive, central, etched with a stylized human silhouette, pulsed with a single, defiant blue light. Guardian protocol active, the lieutenant read from a flickering holographic label, translator struggling with the ancient language. He clicked in amusement, a wet, rattling sound. Primitives. Their kind vanished from records eons ago. Extinct. We wake this one. The Emperor will enjoy a living relic, chained, displayed, broken. Imagine the lesser races gazing upon it and remembering their place. Slith nodded, savoring the arrogance. Override the locks. Carefully. It must survive for the trophy hall. Clawed fingers danced over alien controls. Ancient mechanisms groaned in protest. Frost exploded outward as seals cracked. Cryogenic mist billowed like ghosts awakening. The pod hissed open with a pneumatic sigh that echoed like a dying breath. Inside, Captain Elias Kane convulsed. 2 millennia of dreamless sleep shattered in an instant. Neural implants flared to life, flooding his system with revival nanites. His lean, battle-forged body arched in agony as forgotten nerves reignited. Memories crashed in, Earth's final days, the desperate launch of the Aegis Arc as Sol's colonies burned under an unknown cataclysm. 12 elite crew. A seed of humanity. A library of ideals the galaxy had long forgotten, liberty, ingenuity, the unyielding right to choose one's fate. His eyes snapped open, sharp, hazel, burning with sudden clarity. Alien faces leered down. Reptilian. Scaled. Slitted eyes gleaming with cruel curiosity. The stench of their musk clawed at his throat. Welcome back to the living relic, Slith mocked, voice filtered through a crude translator. Your civilization is dust. Myth. You will serve as our trophy. Entertain the Emperor. Perhaps we let you live long enough to watch your kind's memory erased forever. Kane's mind raced faster than his thawing body. Ship schematics bloomed in his implants, the Aegis Ark, Earth's last ark, armed with dormant defenses and a small but lethal crew complement. He assessed the threat in heartbeats. 70+ hostiles. Arrogant posture. Weapons raised but not firing. Overconfident. A cold, dangerous smile cracked his cryo-chapped lips. You woke the wrong Guardian. Before the Zorak could register the defiance, Kane triggered the Guardian protocol through pure neural command. The vault's dormant grid surged awake. Gravity plates inverted with a violent lurch. 2 shock troops slammed into the ceiling, bones cracking audibly. Emergency lights flared blood-red. Automated turrets unfolded from hidden alcoves with mechanical precision. Kane rolled from the pod, muscles screaming but obeying. His hand snatched a fallen plasma rifle, grip oversized for human hands, but he adapted, fingers locking with brutal efficiency. He fired. The bolt took Slitha's lieutenant in the chest, exploding scales and flesh into green mist. Chaos erupted. Alarms wailed through the Aegis Ark, ancient sirens blending with Zorak shrieks. Boots thundered in the corridors outside. Kane staggered to the master console, blood trickling from split lips, vision still swimming with revival haze. Ark, full status, he rasped. The AI's voice, calm, maternal, eternally human, responded instantly. Cryo systems stable. Crew revival sequences initiating on your authority. Zorak boarding force, 73 confirmed. Reinforcements inbound from the Dominion's Fong. Hull integrity nominal. Defense grid online. Kane slammed emergency seals. Vault doors hissed shut, crushing one unfortunate trooper mid-lunge. Through external feeds he watched the Fong maneuvering aggressively, its guns tracking the now active derelict. His heart hammered, not with fear, but with a fierce, awakening rage. While humanity slept in cryo, monsters had terrorized the stars. Stagnation had choked progress. Oppression had become law. But the giant had stirred. He keyed the first crew revival, Dr. Sophia Reyes, engineer and polymath genius. Then Sergeant Marcus Thorne. Diplomat Lena Hart. One by one, the pods would open. Outside, Slitha's surviving troops regrouped, plasma fire scorching the vault doors. Their captain's transmission already raced toward the throne world, ancient vessel secured. Primitive Guardian awakened as trophy. Glory to Emperor Vexer. Slith had no idea the avalanche he had triggered. Kane gripped the rifle tighter, eyes locked on the tactical display as the first revival pod began to hiss open behind him. The small crew of 12 against billions. The balance of power had already begun to shift. And the Zorak had just rung the dinner bell for something far more dangerous than any trophy. In the void, the Dominion's Fong opened fire. The Aegis Ark shuddered but held, ancient shields flaring to life with forgotten brilliance. Captain Elias Kane allowed himself one savage breath. They terrorized the galaxy, he whispered to the awakening ship. Time to remind them why we left it sleeping. The hunt had begun. And the prey was waking up angry. The Aegis Ark tore away from the Dominion's Fong on raw emergency thrust, engines howling like wounded beasts. Captain Elias Kane gripped the command rail, knuckles white, as the ship spun through the Nebula Vale's treacherous currents. Plasma bolts from the pursuing Zorak fighters scorched the hull, each impact sending violent shudders through the deck plates. Evasive pattern Omega-9. Kane barked, voice raw from cryothaw. Tactical Officer Jax Harlan slammed the controls, his movements sharp and precise despite only minutes out of stasis. Holographic decoys bloomed in their wake, ghost images of the Ark that danced and flickered, drawing enemy fire into empty space. In the medbay, Sergeant Marcus Thorne worked frantically, stabilizing the last waking crew member while monitoring vitals. 12 humans. 12 fragile souls against an empire that had spent centuries grinding entire species into dust. Dr. Sophia Reyes's voice crackled over the comms from engineering, strained but focused. Their technology is stagnant, predictable firing solutions, archaic power curves. But their numbers. God, Elias, there are hundreds more launching from the cruiser. Another direct hit rocked the ship. Warning klaxons screamed. Kane's jaw tightened until it ached. We don't outrun them forever. We outthink them. Drop us into the gas giant's shadow, use the ion storms for cover. The Ark plunged into the roiling atmosphere of a massive gas giant, its turbulent clouds swallowing the ship's signature. Lightning arced across the viewport like angry gods. For precious minutes, the Zorak lost them. Kane used the breathing room to pull up long-range scans. A nearby Lyrith mining colony clung to an asteroid cluster like a wounded bird, feather-winged beings, once proud starsingers, now chained to plasma processors with neural collars that suppressed every creative thought. Their wings had been clipped, their songs silenced. Kane remembered the Ark's archives. The Lyrith had once composed symphonies that could gently shift planetary orbits. Now they died young, hollow-eyed, feeding the Zorak war machine. A stealth shuttle detached under the storm's fury. Kane, Reyes, and diplomat Lena Hart descended through the lightning, hearts pounding as turbulence battered the small craft. They slipped into the colony's undertunnels, dark, damp service shafts reeking of ozone and despair. The first Lyrith they encountered cowered against the wall, dull feathers trembling. Its eyes widened at the sight of humans, creatures from forbidden legends. "We are not Zorak," Hart whispered, her voice gentle yet urgent, projecting a small hollow of the Aegis Ark. "We bring the old words your masters fear. Freedom. Invention. The right to dream again." The elder Lyritha's beak clicked in disbelief, but when Kane demonstrated a simple EMP disruptor, small, elegant, pulled from Ark stores, the device fried the neural collar in seconds. The slave gasped as mental chains shattered, color flooding back into its feathers. "You dare challenge them?" the Lyrith rasped. "Dare." Kane's eyes burned. "We just woke up to find the galaxy on its knees. We're done sleeping." Suspicion melted into desperate, starving hope. Within 2 tense hours, 20 Lyrith were freed, their talons trembling as they copied the disruptor design using scavenged parts. Reyes moved among them like a ghost, whispering upgrades, subtle backdoors into the colony's central control AI that could turn surveillance drones against their Zorak overseers. Tension coiled tighter with every passing minute. Footsteps echoed above, Zorak patrols, their pheromone markers thick in the air. Kane's team moved like shadows, but one patrol caught a trace. Alarms blared. Red emergency lights flooded the tunnels. "Contact!" Thorne growled, raising his rifle. Hand-to-hand combat exploded in the narrow dark. Zorak claws raked the air, stronger and faster than human muscle, but human ingenuity and raw desperation evened the odds. Kane ducked a slashing tail, drove his elbow into a scaled throat, then fired point-blank. Reyes took a grazing plasma burn across her shoulder but kept moving, hacking a security node mid-fight. Hart dragged a wounded Lyrith to safety while singing a fragment of an old human freedom song, its melody cutting through the chaos like a blade of light. They barely escaped. The shuttle screamed upward through the storm as the colony below erupted into its first true riot. Flames bloomed on the asteroid surface. Lyrith voices rose in broken, defiant song for the first time in centuries. Back aboard the Aegis Ark, Kane allowed himself one fierce, savage grin as the hollow feed showed the uprising spreading. One spark. But the Zorak response was swift and merciless. Emperor Vexor's personal decree flashed across quantum relays within minutes. The human relic vessel is now priority Omega. Capture the captain alive. Burn the rest. Any world showing sympathy will taste orbital fire. 3 heavy pursuit cruisers warped into the system, weapons already hot. The Ark fled deeper into contested space, leaving behind a growing network of whispered hope and smuggled Liberty packets, data bursts containing blueprints for railguns, encrypted human histories, and the dangerous idea that no empire was eternal. Reyes worked without sleep in engineering, perfecting viral code that could ride Zorak maintenance pings and spread the ideals disguised as Lyrith folk songs. Kane stood on the bridge, staring at the streaking stars, tension knotting every muscle. A single transmission reached them from the colony, weak but clear, the wings remember. The songs return. Yet sensors screamed new threats, 3 Zorak dreadnoughts closing fast, their guns charging with ominous green glows. Dr. Reyes looked up from her console, face pale and streaked with sweat. They're broadcasting our images across every conquered world. The trophy hunt is now official. Every bounty hunter and warlord in the sector is mobilizing. Kane's eyes narrowed into cold slits, a predator's focus settling over him. Good. Let them chase. Every chase leaves a trail of fire in its wake. Every world that sees us will wonder why the monsters are suddenly afraid. The Aegis Ark jumped again, engines straining. Behind them, the first flames of rebellion licked higher in the dark. The galaxy was listening now. And the humans were only getting started. Underground networks blossomed like hidden roots across 3 star systems, spreading through whispered songs and stolen data bursts. From the mobile command core of the Aegis Ark, now cloaked deep within a swirling nebula, Captain Elias Kane coordinated every fragile thread of resistance. The ship drifted silently, its signature masked by ancient stealth fields, while the small human crew pushed themselves to exhaustion. Dr. Sophia Reyes had perfected the Liberty packets, compact data bursts disguised as routine maintenance pings or harmless Lyrith folk melodies. Each packet carried dangerous cargo, blueprints for simple railguns that any slave with scrap metal could assemble, encrypted archives of free civilizations long erased from Zorak records, and most lethal of all, the idea that no throne was eternal and no chain unbreakable. On the Lyrith homeworld of Etheron, diplomat Lena Hart moved like a shadow among the flocks. Her face was subtly altered by Ark nanomasks, her voice amplified by hidden tech. She stood in crowded market squares beneath clipped-wing banners, weaving forbidden words into old songs. They told you your voices were weak, she called softly, the melody carrying on the wind. We say your songs can shatter chains. Rise and remember who you were before fear became your only song. A young Lyrith, wings still brutally clipped, clutched a smuggled disruptor in trembling talons. When Zorak enforcers descended with neural whips cracking, the crowd did not scatter this time. Feathers flashed in sudden defiance. An improvised sonic lance, built from the Liberty packet designs, dropped the first guard mid-stride. Chaos erupted. The enforcers fell under a rising tide of beaks and talons. Kane watched the live feed on the bridge, fists clenched so tight his nails drew blood. Every victory sent ice through his veins because he knew the cost. A Zorak Psi Weaver cruiser arrived hours later, its psionic amplifiers sweeping the planet like invisible claws, hunting disloyal thoughts. One Lyrith resistance cell was exposed in real time. Kane could only listen helplessly as screams echoed across the open channel before the feed went dark. 12 voices silenced forever. He slammed his console, voice hoarse. We lost 12 good souls today. But they died singing. Their song will carry farther than their fear ever did. Yet the seeds kept spreading. On the volcanic forge world of Caldera 9, insectoid miners received the packets through a hijack supply drone. Their once docile hive mind stirred. Coordinated sabotage began, tunnels collapsed precisely on Zorak overseers, not workers. Sergeant Marcus Thorne led a high-risk raid to deliver heavier Ark technology, portable shield generators that turned slave barracks into temporary fortresses for a single, glorious night of resistance. Close calls mounted with every operation, tightening the noose around the Aegis Arkansas. During one extraction, Jax Harlan's infiltration team nearly died when a pheromone scanner pinged faint human sweat traces on a ventilation shaft. They escaped by venting superheated plasma into the duct, cooking 3 Zorak hunters alive, but the maneuver forced the Ark to burn precious fuel on an emergency pickup under heavy fire. Reyes's voice cracked with exhaustion over comms during the desperate rendezvous. We're pushing too hard, Elias. They're starting to correlate patterns. Their stagnation is cracking, they're adapting just enough to become dangerous again. Emperor Vexor's holographic rage now played on every conquered world, his scaled face twisted with fury. The human relic corrupts our order. Find the primitive ship. Bring its captain to me alive. I will wear his spine as a trophy while the galaxy watches his broken body broadcast on every screen. Bounty fleets tripled overnight. The Ark dodged 3 separate ambushes in a single week, each escape narrower and more costly than the last. Kane barely slept, haunted by the faces of fallen allies and the weight of every decision. Yet the underground grew stronger. A captured Zorak frigate, hijacked by defecting conscripts who had heard the forbidden broadcasts, quietly joined their shadow fleet. Its scarred captain knelt before Kane on the Ark's deck, scales cracked from years of abuse. "Your ideals burn hotter than our suns," the defector rasped. "I will fly against my former masters." The true turning point came on the plasma-forged world of Drakthal. Millions of slaves toiled in the blazing forges that armed the Zorak war machine. Kane authorized the boldest move yet, a full Ark broadcast during Emperor Vexor's own galaxy-wide address. The signal hijacked every view screen simultaneously. Kane's face appeared beside the Emperor's, calm, unbowed, eyes blazing with quiet fire. "Empires fall when the oppressed remember a simple truth: you outnumber your masters. They have claws and stagnation. You have numbers and tomorrow. Rise. The galaxy is waiting for your voices." Riots exploded across Drakthal. Forges went dark. Slave chants drowned out Zorak sirens. For precious hours, hope reigned. But as victory cries rose, the Ark sensors lit up like a supernova. Vexor's elite Deathwing armada, hundreds of capital ships, warped into the system, weapons already charging, their formation a wall of death blotting out the stars. Kane stared at the tactical display, the sheer scale of it stealing his breath for a heartbeat. The Emperor was no longer sending patrols. He was coming for them specifically now. His voice remained ice-calm as he opened the channel to every rebel cell. "They're coming. We stand. We fight. And if this is where hope meets the end, then we make sure the galaxy never forgets what a few awake humans can start." The Armada burned hard toward the rebel stronghold. The Aegis Ark held position at the heart of the growing resistance fleet, small, battered, but radiating defiance like a newborn star. The seeds of rebellion had taken root. Now came the storm that would test whether they could survive the harvest. Deep in the obsidian throne hall on the Zorak homeworld, Emperor Vexor coiled around his jagged black perch, tail lashing like a whip. The air reeked of blood incense and barely contained rage. Holographic feeds surrounded him, each one displaying fresh reports of rebellion, Lyrith uprisings on Etheron, insectoid sabotage on Caldera 9, entire forge lines going dark on Drakthal. 12 primitive humans had done this. 12. Insolent relics, Vexor hissed, venom dripping from his fangs. His yellow eyes burned with cold fury. "They woke a single guardian and now my galaxy burns. I want that ship. I want its captain flayed alive while every world watches. The Aegis Ark is priority Omega-1. Burn any system that harbors it." Psy-Weaver priests bowed low, their minds already probing the ether for traces of human neural signatures. Bounty fleets swelled. The Emperor's personal Deathwing armada began mobilizing, every dreadnought, every carrier, every weapon the stagnant Empire could muster. Aboard the Aegis Ark, hidden in the radiation shadow of a dead star, Captain Elias Kane felt the noose tightening. The ship had gone completely dark for 40 hours, every non-essential system powered down, life support at minimum. Dr. Sofia Reyes worked frantically at the engineering station, sweat beading on her brow as she upgraded the cloak with scavenged Zorak components and human ingenuity. "They're learning," she whispered, voice tight. "Their stagnation is cracking under pressure. The last ambush almost caught us because they started predicting our evasion patterns." Kane nodded, jaw set. He had split the crew into smaller cells to spread the risk. Sergeant Marcus Thorne led diversionary strikes on supply convoys, hitting hard and vanishing. Jax Harlan trained Lyrith pilots on captured fighters, turning feather-winged slaves into deadly aces almost overnight. Diplomat Lena Hart wove alliances between species that had never trusted one another under Zorak rule. Kane and Reyes remained aboard the Ark as the beating heart of the resistance, poring over ancient human archives for any tactical edge. "Their greatest weakness is still stagnation," Reyes said, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "They haven't invented anything truly new in centuries. But desperation is making them dangerous. They're adapting just enough." The first betrayal came without warning. A Lyrith liaison, captured and broken by Psy-Weaver torture, leaked a critical rendezvous point. Zorak gunships materialized out of nowhere, weapons already firing. The Ark's shields flared brilliant blue under the sudden barrage. Alarms screamed across every deck. Emergency warp. Kane ordered. They jumped blind, straight into a pre-placed Zorak minefield. Explosions rocked the hull. Bulkheads buckled. One crewman died heroically sealing a plasma breach, his final words crackling over comms, "Keep the light burning." They escaped by the thinnest margin, but the debris trail gave the hunters a scent. Vexor responded with savage efficiency. 3 Lyrith colonies that had openly cheered the human broadcasts were glassed from orbit before Kane could get warning signals through. The screams of millions echoed in every rebel transmission. Kane listened to every one, fists clenched until they bled, committing each voice to memory. Yet the humans refused to break. Reyes devised ghost fleets, sophisticated holographic projections of phantom Aegis arcs that lured entire Zorak battlegroups into empty nebulae and asteroid fields, wasting fuel and ammunition while the real ship struck elsewhere. Kane's recorded speeches, smuggled via Liberty packets, became underground anthems. His calm, unyielding voice carried the same dangerous promise: "They have claws. We have tomorrow." Tension reached a breaking point during the siege of Vale Station, a vital orbital dockyard the rebels desperately needed to arm their growing forces. Kane personally led the boarding action, rifle in hand, moving through zero-gravity corridors like a vengeful ghost. He faced a Zorak champion in brutal single combat, dodging slashing claws and whipping tail, using the alien's greater size and momentum against it. The fight was messy, brutal. Kane's knife found the soft spot beneath the jaw. The champion died gurgling. The station fell to human-led rebels after 6 grueling hours. Shields and weapons flowed to the resistance for the first time in meaningful numbers. But as the Aegis Arc withdrew under covering fire, sensors lit up with apocalyptic fury. Vexor had committed everything. The full Deathwing Armada, hundreds of capital ships, their hulls bristling with weapons, warped into the sector, engines burning white-hot. The Emperor's flagship Eternal Fong dominated the formation, a monstrous leviathan of blackened alloy and green-glowing cannons. The Armada blotted out the stars, a wall of death moving with singular purpose. Kane stood on the bridge, staring at the tactical display as the sheer scale registered. Billions of tons of metal. Centuries of tyrannical power. All aimed at one small human ship and the fragile hope it had ignited. His voice stayed steady as he opened the fleet-wide channel to every rebel ship and ground cell. "This is it. They're coming for us specifically now. We stand. We fight. And if we fall free. Let the galaxy remember that a few awake humans were enough to make an emperor tremble." Behind him, the surviving crew looked exhausted, bloodied, but their eyes burned with unbreakable resolve. The Aegis Arc's remaining weapons powered up with a low, ominous hum. The nebula around them began to glow with the incoming engine signatures of the Armada, thousands of them. The last stand was no longer a possibility. It had arrived. Emperor Vexor's personal transmission cut across all frequencies, dripping with venomous triumph. "I am coming for you, Kane. Your awakening was the death rattle of your kind. Surrender now, and I may let some of your pets live as curiosities." Kane met the camera with a cold, predator's smile that held no fear, only promise. "We've been awake for a while now, Vexor. Come and see exactly what that costs you." The Armada closed in. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The final annihilation seemed certain. But in the deep black between galaxies, something ancient and transcendent had already begun to stir in answer to the long-range beacon the Aegis Arc had been broadcasting since the very first day. The shadow of the Emperor was falling. The light of humanity was about to answer. The Battle of Caro's Rift would be remembered as the moment hope caught fire. The thin rebel line formed in the glowing maw of the rift, a jagged wound in space where cosmic storms raged and navigation was pure suicide. Cobbled-together ships, stolen frigates, and desperate Lyrith fighters stood shoulder to shoulder against the oncoming Deathwing Armada. At the heart of the formation floated the battered Aegis Arc, its hull scarred by a dozen previous escapes, shields flickering at barely 40%. Captain Elias Kane stood on the bridge, hands locked on the command rail, eyes scanning the tactical hologram that painted the enemy as an endless tide of red icons. Sergeant Marcus Thorne led the fighter wings from a forward cockpit, voice steady over comms despite the madness. Dr. Sophia Reyes worked miracles at engineering, rerouting every spare erg of power between weapons and shields. Jax Harlan called targets with cold precision. Lena Hart coordinated the fragile alliance of species that had never fought together before. "Hold the line," Kane transmitted across every rebel frequency, his voice cutting through the static like a blade. "They have numbers. We have meaning. For every world that dares to dream tonight, fight." The Zorak Armada emerged from warp like a predator uncoiling, thousands of ships blotting out the distant stars. Emperor Vexor's voice boomed across all open channels, dripping with venomous contempt. "Surrender the human relics and live as favored pets. Resist, and your stars will burn until nothing remains but ash and silence." The first volley lit the rift in sickly green fire. Plasma lances stabbed forward. Rebel ships died in silent blossoms of light. A Lyrith cruiser, its crew singing their ancient battle hymns, rammed a Zorak dreadnought in a final act of defiance, both vessels erupting into a miniature sun. Kane watched the sacrifice on the main screen, jaw tight. "Return fire, focus on command nodes," he ordered. The Aegis Ark's ancient rail cannons spoke for the first time in millennia. Hyper-accelerated slugs tore through Zorak shields with terrifying efficiency, punching holes in formations that had never faced such primitive yet lethal weaponry. Reyes unleashed her newest creation, a cascading virus that infected enemy targeting computers, making Zorak ships see allies as hostiles. Friendly fire tore ragged gaps in the Armada's perfect lines. For 3 brutal hours the battle raged. Human ingenuity turned tide after tide. Thorn's fighter wing danced through the maelstrom, using the rift storms as cover, delivering precision strikes that crippled engine clusters. Lyrith pilots, wings finally free in spirit if not yet in body, dove with suicidal courage, their songs rising even as their ships burned. But Vexor committed his reserves. The Armada reformed, tighter and meaner, learning with every loss. The Eternal Fong loomed larger, its guns charging with ominous power. A direct hit struck the Ark's port engine nacelle. The ship shuddered violently. Bulkheads buckled. Kane was thrown across the bridge, tasting blood. Alarms screamed critical failure. "Damage report," he snarled. Reyes's voice came back ragged, "We're venting atmosphere. Shields at 12%, 40 minutes of sustained combat left, if we're lucky." Sacrifices mounted with every passing minute. A Lyrith cruiser sacrificed itself to block a killing salvo aimed at the Ark. Its captain's final transmission crackled with quiet pride, "The songs continue." Kane felt the weight of every death-like lead in his chest, but he kept his voice steel. "All ships, fall back toward the nebula. We make our stand at the Ark's original coordinates. Draw them in close. Let them come to us." The retreat was a nightmare of fire and loss. Thousands died covering the withdrawal. Kane's own shuttle barely made it back through the firestorm, weaving between exploding debris while Zorak fighters swarmed like angry hornets. When he staggered onto the bridge, the surviving crew looked to him, exhausted, bloodied, some wounded, but their eyes still burned with defiance. Vexor's personal transmission arrived, aimed solely at the Arkansas. "I am coming for you, Kane. Your little spark ends here. I will broadcast your broken body across every world so that no one ever dares wake again." Kane met the camera with a predator's smile, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "We've been awake longer than you think, Vexor. Come and see exactly what that costs an empire built on fear." Behind him, the Aegis Ark's remaining weapons powered to full with a low, hungry thrum. The nebula ahead began to glow with the engine signatures of the incoming Armada, thousands upon thousands of them, a tidal wave of green death closing fast. The rebel fleet formed its final, desperate crescent around the Arkansas sensors showed annihilation was certain. Numbers too vast. Firepower too overwhelming. Kane opened the fleet-wide channel one last time, voice raw but steady. "If this is the end, let the galaxy remember this. Humans woke from cryo sleep, and tyranny learned to fear the dark again. Fight on. Fight free." The Armada opened fire in perfect, devastating unison. The Eternal Fong led the charge, its main batteries locking onto the Ark's core. Shields collapsed. The ship screamed under the onslaught. Bulkheads groaned. Gravity flickered. For one terrifying moment, It seemed the spark would be extinguished forever. Kane gripped the rail, staring death in the face, refusing to look away. Then space itself tore open. Rift after rift bloomed across the nebula, vast, shimmering portals of impossible blue light. From them poured salvation. Not dozens. Not hundreds. Thousands of ships, sleek and alive with transcendent energy, crewed by humans who had never known cryo sleep. Their weapons sang in frequencies that made Zorak shields evaporate like morning mist. Their formations moved with impossible coordination. A single transmission reached the Aegis Arc, warm, confident, impossibly vast. Guardian Kane, this is Admiral Sophia Reyes of the Andromeda Command. The spark you lit has called the fire home. Stand down. We finish this together. The Transcendent Fleet did not merely fight. It reshaped the battlefield in seconds. Vexor's roar of rage turned to raw terror as the Eternal Fong listed, its bridge exploding in silent fire. The Emperor's armada, once invincible, began to come apart under weapons that operated on principles the stagnant Zorak could not even comprehend. The final annihilation had seemed certain. Instead, the flames of defiance had summoned something far greater. And the galaxy would never be the same. The nebula had become a slaughterhouse of fire and shattered dreams. The Aegis Arc floated at the center of the desperate crescent formation, battered hull venting plasma in thin white streams, shields flickering like a dying heartbeat. Captain Elias Kane walked the smoke-filled corridors, rifle slung across his back, rallying the wounded with a voice that refused to break. Hold fast, he told a group of bloodied Lyrith warriors and human engineers huddled in a makeshift aid station. They have numbers. We have meaning. Every second we stand is another world that hears our song. Dr. Sophia Reyes worked at the edge of collapse in engineering, her hands flying across consoles as she rerouted power from failing systems. One more volley, she whispered hoarsely. Then we're done. Shields won't take another sustained barrage. Sergeant Marcus Thorne held a critical choke point near the port airlock, his rifle barking in short, disciplined bursts. A handful of Lyrith fighters fought beside him, their clipped wings trembling with exhaustion but their eyes fierce. Come on, you scaled bastards. Thorne roared as another boarding pod slammed home. We've got songs left to sing. Zorak boarding parties poured in like a green tide. Hand-to-hand fighting erupted in every corridor. Claws raked armor. Plasma burned flesh. Kane himself charged into the cryovault to defend the very pods that had started everything. He killed 3 Zorak shock troops in brutal close quarters, knife work in the dim emergency lighting, using the aliens' own momentum against them. Blood, both red and green, slicked the deck. On the bridge, Jax Harlan and Lena Hart coordinated what remained of the rebel fleet. The tactical hologram showed the situation as dire, rebel forces dwindling, Zorak armada reforming for the final push. The Emperor's flagship Eternal Fong loomed enormous on the main view screen, its massive cannons glowing with charging energy. Vexor's voice echoed across every frequency, triumphant and venomous. Target the Ark's core. I want the human captain alive just long enough to beg for mercy in front of the galaxy. The Armada opened fire in perfect, synchronized fury. The Aegis Arc screamed. Shields collapsed entirely. A direct hit from the Eternal Fong tore through the port side, ripping open decks and sending bodies tumbling into vacuum. Gravity plates failed in sections. Alarms howled critical failure across every system. Kane was thrown against a bulkhead, blood streaming from a gash on his temple. He staggered back to his feet, vision swimming. Damage report, he shouted over the chaos. Reyes's reply was barely audible through static and explosions. Hull breaches on 7 decks. Main reactor at 60% and dropping. We have maybe 10 minutes before the core goes critical. Outside, the battle had turned into pure carnage. Lyrith cruisers burned like falling stars, their crews singing until the end. Insectoid hive ships sacrificed themselves in desperate rams, taking out Zorak destroyers but dying by the hundreds. A final, broken transmission came from a rebel commander whose ship was already breaking apart. It was worth it. To dream again. Kane dragged himself back to the bridge, every step a battle. The surviving crew looked at him, faces streaked with sweat, blood, and tears, but their eyes still held that unbreakable spark. He opened the fleet-wide channel, voice raw, steady, and filled with quiet defiance. If this is the end, let the galaxy remember this moment. Humans woke from cryo-sleep, and an empire that terrorized the stars for centuries learned fear. Fight on. Fight free. The spark does not die here. The Eternal Fong maneuvered for the killing shot. Its main batteries locked onto the Ark's exposed core. Vexor's laughter crackled over the open channel. Your awakening was your greatest mistake, Kane. Now watch your precious hope burn. Kane stood tall at the center of the bridge, refusing to look away from the oncoming doom. The ship shuddered violently as secondary explosions rippled through the hull. Red emergency lights bathed everything in blood-red glow. For one terrifying heartbeat, annihilation seemed not just certain, but immediate. The last rebel ships formed a final, suicidal wall in front of the Ark, buying seconds with their lives. Kane closed his eyes for the briefest moment, whispering to the ship that had carried humanity's last hope across 2,000 years. Thank you for waking us. Then space itself tore open. Not with the violent green of Zorak warp signatures, but with shimmering portals of impossible, transcendent blue. Rift after rift bloomed across the nebula like flowers of light, vast, perfectly formed gateways that defied every law the stagnant empire understood. From them poured the impossible. Thousands of ships. Sleek, elegant vessels that moved with living grace, hulls shimmering with energy fields far beyond Zorak comprehension. Their weapons sang in harmonic frequencies that made enemy shields evaporate like mist before sunlight. Their formations flowed like liquid, perfectly coordinated by minds and AIs that had never known the chains of stagnation. A single, warm transmission cut through the chaos and reached the Aegis Ark directly. Guardian Kane, this is Admiral Elara Voss of the Transcendent Fleet. The beacon you lit has been answered. The full might of humanity crosses galaxies for one small spark. Hold fast. We are here. The tide turned in seconds. The Eternal Fong listed violently as unknown weapons tore through its shields and armor like paper. Vexor's roar of rage twisted into raw, animal terror as his flagship's bridge exploded around him in silent, brilliant fire. Zorak's ships began to break formation, some attempting desperate retreats, others firing wildly into the new arrivals only to find their weapons useless against the transcendent technology. Boarding parties that had been moments from overrunning the Ark suddenly found themselves cut off as human reinforcements in living armor teleported directly into the corridors, offering surrender with open hands and calm voices. Kane stared at the view screen, bloodied and exhausted, as the impossible unfolded before him. The last stand had not been the end. It had been the call that brought an entire civilization home. And the Emperor's shadow was finally breaking. The nebula, once a graveyard of burning hulls and dying screams, now pulsed with transcendent blue light. Rift after rift shimmered like living auroras as the full might of humanity's civilization poured through from another galaxy. Thousands of sleek, impossibly advanced ships moved with graceful precision, their energy signatures so pure they made the stagnant Zorak technology look like crude stone tools. Captain Elias Kane stood on the damaged bridge of the Aegis Ark, blood still drying on his face, rifle loose in his grip. The ship groaned around him, bulkheads twisted, consoles sparking, but it lived. The surviving crew gathered behind him, Dr. Sofia Reyes leaning heavily on a console, Sergeant Marcus Thorne with a fresh bandage across his chest, Jax Harlan and Lena Hart watching the viewscreen in stunned silence. A warm, confident voice filled the bridge comms. Guardian Kane, this is Admiral Elara Voss of the Andromeda Command. The spark you lit has called the fire home. Stand down. We finish this together. The Transcendent Fleet did not conquer with brute force. It reshaped the battlefield with surgical elegance. Zorak weapons simply ceased to function as harmonic disruptors neutralized their power cores. Shields evaporated under frequencies the stagnant empire had never encountered. The Eternal Fong, once the terror of the galaxy, listed helplessly as precision strikes crippled its engines and command systems without slaughtering the crew. Emperor Vexor's flagship drifted dead in space, its obsidian hull cracked and venting atmosphere. From an escape pod, the broken ruler was extracted, not as a trophy, but as a prisoner. His scales were scorched, his proud tail limp, yellow eyes wide with disbelief as living armored human marines escorted him aboard the repaired Aegis Arkansas. Kane met the Emperor in the central cryo vault, the same chamber where he had first awakened months earlier. Vexor was forced to his knees before the human captain. The once mighty tyrant hissed weakly, venom gone from his voice. "You primitives. 12 of you. How?" Kane looked down at the fallen Emperor with quiet steel, no hatred, only exhausted resolve. "You woke us to be a trophy. Instead, we woke the galaxy. A few awake humans were enough to remind every oppressed species what freedom feels like. Your stagnation fed on fear. We fed on hope." Vexor tried one last curse, but the words died as the full weight of his empire's collapse settled on him. He was led away to face justice decided not by humans, but by the liberated races, Lyrith, insectoids, and dozens of others who had suffered under his reign. There would be no glassing. No mass executions. Only fair trials and the slow, painful rebuilding of societies long crushed. In the weeks that followed, the Zorak dominion did not fall in fire and blood. It crumbled in irrelevance. World after world chose its own path. Lyrith flocks sang again, their wings regrowing under gentle medical care from the Transcendent Fleet. Insectoid hives rebuilt their colonies with new purpose, no longer feeding a war machine. Former Zorak conscripts, many of whom had quietly defected during the final battles, laid down their weapons and asked to learn the forbidden ideals that had toppled their empire. The small crew of the Aegis Ark walked among the liberated as living legends. Children on a dozen worlds pointed at the scarred human ship in the skies and whispered stories of the sleeping guardians who woke to shatter chains. Kane, Reyes, Thorn, and the others share the ancient library of human ideals, liberty, ingenuity, the right to dream, without forcing them. They simply offered the tools. The galaxy chose to take them. Kane stood on the observation deck of the Aegis Ark, now fully repaired and leading a new joint exploration fleet. The nebula had cleared, revealing uncounted stars burning bright and free. Dr. Sophia Reyes joined him, her shoulder still bandaged but her eyes clear for the first time since awakening. "They terrorized the galaxy for 12 centuries, she said softly, watching a Lyrith songship dance gracefully past the viewport, its crew singing openly for the first time in generations. All because they feared anything new." Kane smiled, the weight of cryo sleep and brutal war finally lifting from his shoulders. The neural implants no longer burned with constant vigilance. For the first time, he felt peace. "Until humans woke up," he replied. "A dozen of us started it. And the rest of us finished it." Admiral Alara Voss appeared via hollow projection, her uniform crisp, her presence radiating the quiet confidence of a civilization that had crossed galaxies without losing its soul. "The Andromeda fleets are already helping rebuild infrastructure where it's wanted. No occupation. No new empire. Just open hands and better tools. Your beacon reached us across the void, Captain. We came because we never forgot what humanity left behind when the first Ark ships launched." Kane nodded. "And we never forgot why we left." The Transcendent Fleet did not stay as rulers. They stayed as teachers, as partners, as equals. Where resistance lingered among hardline Zorak loyalists, they simply out-engineered it, offering surrender with technologies that made continued fighting pointless. Most chose life and a chance to build something new. In the quiet months that followed, new songs rose across the galaxy. Lyrith melodies once again aligned stars in gentle harmony. Insectoid collective minds wove symphonies of creation instead of destruction. Former slaves walked without collars, inventing, debating, dreaming. Captain Elias Kane watched it all from the deck of the Aegis Ark, now a symbol of hope rather than defiance. The small crew that had awakened in chains had become the catalyst for something far greater. They had proven that while a few humans could inspire a revolution with nothing but forgotten ideals and raw ingenuity, the full might of their civilization could reshape the destiny of an entire galaxy. The terror was over. The awakening had only just begun. And somewhere, in the vast silence between the new songs of free peoples, the galaxy finally breathed free, bright, loud, and unafraid.